Imagine a world where death was as much a statement as it was an end. In the heart of ancient Rome, punishments were crafted with chilling precision, each stroke of cruelty a reminder of the empire's unyielding power. Crucifixion, reserved for the lowest, left dangling under a merciless sun, the gruesome embrace of the Poena Culli, where those who slayed kin vanished beneath river currents, tangled in animal company. And then the roar of the Colosseum, where beasts dined on the condemned. Fire, club and lash all left their mark, reminders that Rome demanded fear as much as it bred awe. Soldiers weren't spared either. Loyalty ensured through terrifying games of chance, as darkness wrapped others in silent ends. As you listen, picture the faces, not of statues but people, each punishment resonating with a message. Defiance bore a Roman price. Let us journey back to ancient Rome, where justice was as relentless as it was theatrical. Under the broad arches of the Roman Empire, punishment transcended mere consequence and became a symbol of the state's power. In this empire of marble and might, crucifixion stood out as the epitome of torment, a sentence reserved for traitors, slaves, and those who dared to defy the emperor's will. Its origins trace back to Persia and Carthage, but Rome perfected it, turning a grim execution into a macabre art form steeped in humiliation and excruciating pain. The Romans wielded crucifixion not just as punishment, but as the ultimate deterrent. Rebels and wrongdoers trembled at the thought, knowing it was designed not just to end life, but to extend suffering publicly. Stripped bare, whipped and nailed to wooden beams, the victims endured not hours but days of agony. Scorching sun by day and bone-chilling winds by night conspired with scavenging birds to complete this grim tableau. Crucifixion was as much about spectacle as it was about death, a horrible reminder to all who witnessed it of the empire's unyielding authority. The spectacle began long before the first nail pierced flesh. The condemned were paraded through the streets, bloodied and beaten, struggling under the weight of a heavy wooden beam. This torturous procession, watched by jeering crowds, was both punishment and parade, an embodiment of suffering displayed for all to see. Onlookers, both rich and poor, gathered at execution sites like Golgotha. For the upper class, it affirmed their status and the privileges they enjoyed under Rome's rigid hierarchy. For the lower classes, it was a stark, if bizarre, form of entertainment, a reminder of their precarious place in society. Crucifixion had far-reaching implications beyond its immediate brutality. It became a vital tool for political and religious control, quelling potential uprisings before they could take root. The crucifixion of Jesus of Nazareth transformed this punishment into something more profound, inadvertently sowing the seeds for a new religious movement. The cross, once a mere symbol of torment, evolved into an emblem of hope and faith. This irony adds to the complex legacy of crucifixion. Once a tool of oppression, now a symbol of salvation for billions. The mechanics of this torture were as intricate as they were gruesome. Victims hung suspended, each breath a Herculean effort, their bodies contorted unnaturally, with dislocated limbs and searing pain accompanying every shallow inhalation. The relentless sun and a lack of water added dehydration to their excruciating demise, while insects feasted on open wounds. This horrifying dance with death was a testament to Roman efficiency, each moment curated to maximise agony and fear, imprinting indelibly on the minds of the onlookers. Beyond the physical, crucifixion was also psychological warfare. It planted a seed of pervasive fear deep within the Roman populace, a chilling reminder of the consequences of crossing the Empire. The haunting cries and the sight of bodies hanging against the sky were not easily forgotten, a daily reminder of Rome's control. It forged societal cohesion through enforced silence, a collective understanding that defiance had a deadly price. For executioners, the task was both a duty and an isolating stigma. Often slaves themselves, these men performed the Empire's darkest work, choreographing suffering with disturbing precision. Although necessary to the state, they stood apart from the society they served, shunned by a populace that both needed and feared them. Yet, in their grim vocation lay a certain dark autonomy, an unsettling mastery over life and death that cast them as both artisans of pain and outcasts. Crucifixion left an indelible mark on culture and consciousness. It inhabited literature and art, casting long shadows over the works of philosophers and historians. The cross's transformation from a symbol of pain to an icon of faith underscores its enduring impact and its ability to transcend its brutal origins. Paradoxically, it became a beacon of human resilience and spiritual transcendence, a complex legacy woven into the human narrative. As we close this chapter, crucifixion remains a chilling testament to the reach of Roman authority, its structured cruelty serving as a reminder of history's darker corners. Yet, it also serves as a reflection on human endurance and change, evolving from a tool of terror to a symbol of hope. The echoes of these ancient torments continue to resonate, a constant in the dialogue between past and present. Through this, crucifixion endures, a perennial whisper challenging us to reflect on the truth that shape our world. In ancient Rome, few crimes were seen with more horror than parricide, the act of murdering one's own parent. Within a society that worshipped the sanctity of family, such a betrayal was not only a personal affront, but a seismic rupture in the social order. Parricide was regarded as a vile attack on the harmonious architecture of familial duty and paternal power, which kept Roman society glued together. To remedy such an act demanded a response as symbolic as it was severe. Enter poena culli, the punishment meant not just to kill, but to convey a message etched with terror and dark symbolism. With practiced finality, the criminal was sewn into a leather sack. This sack was not empty. It harboured a dog, a rooster, a snake, and a monkey. Each creature carried its own symbolic weight, transforming the execution into a grim tapestry of layered meanings. The dog, both a loyal guardian and despised scavenger, mocked the unfaithful loyalty shattered by such an egregious crime. The snake, with its skin shedding and rebirth associations, implied a sinister and venomous retribution. The rooster tied to the dawn seemed to signal not a new day, but a descent into cacophonous oblivion. Meanwhile, the monkey, clever yet disorderly, personified the unnatural revolt against Roman familial life. Witnesses would gather around, their hushed conversations underpinned by dread, as lords of law performed a ritual both concrete and unyielding in its brutality, a spectacle to teach lasting lessons. This blended ritual of execution unfolded like a macabre dance, robed in ceremonial foreboding. The condemned felt terror take liquid form in their veins as they faced the gaze of their executioners, and a crowd fueled by judgment and morbid curiosity. By the end, the sack would be cast into the river as both an unmarked grave and a cleanser, washing away the contamination from the world above. In Roman eyes, such a ceremony wasn't merely punishment, it was a grim form of purification. It mirrored legal proceedings that were themselves imbued with gravity. Accusations led to thorough trials where defendants stood against societal norms as much as they did against their accusers. Roman trials for parricides became public demonstrations of moral rectitude, drawing throngs who watched as justice was served in sweeping strokes. The ritual played almost like theatre, with a solemn judge, tempestuous audience, and criminals trapped under a spotlight of both human and divine judgment. This brutal tradition cast a long shadow over Roman culture. Families shook in fear, questioning the very stability of kinship ties. Chroniclers penned accounts with a balance between historicity and poetic narrative, infusing their stories with an eerie blend of fact and cautionary tale. Roman texts, letters and inscriptions still whisper narratives packed with the cautious tension of a society forever wary of internal betrayals. This preoccupation with loyalty and order was not limited to the peasantry. It permeated all classes, though discrepancies existed. Nobility, while facing a steeper fall from grace, often encountered trials that lingered longer, dealt with ceremoniously, mirroring the importance they held in sustaining societal equilibrium. Yet, leather sack or not, the river embraced all equally, leaving rank and privilege indistinct beneath its surface. There was an overarching power to these rituals, found not just in their societal roles, but in their divine context. Honouring the gods played a crucial part in the decision to dip the condemned into water, a medium seen as a cosmic broom. In their worldview, the punishment appealed for grace from celestial overseers, woven with hopes of restoring harmony both above and below. Even as the sack was engulfed by the river's chill, eyes turned upward, seeking approval from the vault of heaven. The Poena Culli's grip on Roman memory, both feared and etched into the lexicon, transcended its literal execution. It settled into folklore, transformed into a moral compass to direct thoughts on human weaknesses and societal rules. While we might view this practice through the more polished lens of modern sensibilities, it mingled Roman practicality with a bitter cocktail of irony. The horror of being consigned to the river wasn't merely to drown a life. It obliterated stories, reputations, and all public memory. The condemned vanished not only from life but from history, ensuring that society's moral landscape remained unmarred by their actions. Words spread far beyond Rome, echoing this moral underpinning with each retelling like ripples through water, carrying lessons of conformity and the weight of unfaltering eyes, always watching from the heavens. This ritual speaks to the eternal dance between law, society, and the darkness on the edge of the collective heart, a sombre reminder of the complexities that govern the unseen strings of fate and righteousness in human affairs. Within the vast stone embrace of the Colosseum, Rome's thirst for spectacle and supremacy unfolded in the most chillingly theatrical of manners. The grand amphitheatre, built under the watchful eyes of the Flavian emperors, existed not just as an architectural wonder, but as a testament to Rome's might and its taste for cruel entertainment. Crowds swarmed to the Colosseum, eager to witness damnatio ad bestias, the grim fate met by prisoners, whose lives ended in a dance with death, amidst the roaring applause of thousands. Here execution was transformed into a public display of fear, a calculated narrative to reinforce the power of the Roman state. The air thick with anticipatory murmurs and the mingling scents of sweat, animal musk and cooking street food, spectators from all walks of life came together, united by their fascination with this grim theatre. This was more than mere entertainment. It was a show where justice and punishment performed their roles on the sandied stage of empire. In those critical seconds, when man confronted beast amid the sand-strewn arena, the illusion of control shattered momentarily, revealing a dance as ancient as time. A predator meeting prey. Odysseys of the unspoken struggles inside the arena lines were drawn between the primal ferocity of exotic beasts and the despair of the condemned. Lions, tigers and bears, brought from the far reaches of the empire, symbolised not just domination over animals, but the reach of Rome into the farthest corners of the known world. The arena became a melting pot of chaos, where power and vulnerability found a tense common ground. Some beasts, bewildered by their own captivity and spectacle, hesitated, while others lunged with unabashed ferocity, leaving the audience teetering between horror and awe. Among those thrust into this grim arena were prisoners of war, rebellious slaves and all manner of societal undesirables. Damnatio ad bestia served as a cruel equalizer, wiping clean any previous status. Relegated to become unwilling actors in this deadly theatre, they faced not only an end, but an erasure of rebellion and agency, a stark reminder that the empire brooked no dissent. The spectators too played their part, cheering or jeering, reminded of their own precarious place in the empire's grand design. The day of execution arrived swathed in pageantry and routine. Citizens gathered at dawn, filling the streets and converging on the Colosseum in an almost festive procession. Vendors peddled food and tawdry trinkets, transforming the city into a lively pre-show cacophony. Within the towering stone architecture, priests might perform rituals, blessing or cursing, imbuing the day with a gravitas that bridged the space between theatre and rite. Amid this bloody spectacle, the gladiators moved, their own narratives entwined with the fate of the doomed. Part entertainers, part executioners, these fighters straddled the fine line between celebrated heroes and instruments of the state's grim justice. The crowd revered these warriors, who with skill and indifference dispatched condemned prisoners, further blurring the lines of morality within the Colosseum's bloody embrace. In rare cases amidst this maddening arena, stories of improbable survival emerged. Those who outlasted the beast's onslaught became reluctant legends, their tales told and retold, woven into the very tapestry of Roman lore. Sometimes spared through clerical error or their sheer fortitude, these survivors symbolised the fickle nature of fate and added a glimmer of hope amidst the unyielding grip of Empire's wrath. Yet the whole orchestrated horror of Damnatio ad Bestia served a purpose far beyond mere entertainment. It functioned as propaganda in the guise of spectacle. By painting a dire picture of defiance crushed underfoot, the Romans underscored their grip on societal norms, demonstrating that disobedience bore a deathly price. For emperors basking in a populace's adoration or anger, these events were opportunities to assert their dominance subtly. Today, reflecting upon these spectacles invites modern audiences into a dialogue with the past. While today's ethics stand in stark contrast, there remains a haunting attraction to these acts of orchestrated brutality. The narrative urges exploration of enduring questions of justice, control, and human nature. Rome's bloody echoes continue to reverberate, reminding us of both humanity's capacity for unyielding power and the persistent shadows of its ancient, brutal theatre. Though the sands have settled and the beasts long since silenced, the legacy of Damnatio ad Bestias endures, a relic of power, fear, and the chilling depths of human spectacle. Burning alive stands as one of the most harrowing punishments in history, reserved for the gravest criminals in ancient Rome. This fiery end was believed to do more than merely execute. It symbolically purged an individual of sins. Its purifying wrath meant to cleanse moral corruption. In a society where religion interwove with every aspect of life, fire took on a role beyond destruction, acting as a bridge to the divine. This dual nature of fire made it a fitting tool for both punishment and purification. The condemned faced the pyre after a public trial, drawing attentive crowds eager to witness justice. The execution was a grim theatre meant to shock, with the crackle of flames serving as a chilling chorus to the cries of the condemned. Authorities intended these events to deter crime, emphasising the heavy cost of defying Rome's moral framework. As these terrible flames danced, they illustrated a system willing to invoke the elements themselves as enforcers of justice. Particularly heinous acts like sacrilege, treason, and witchcraft were punishable by burning, each violating the strict moral codes of Rome. Sacrilege against temples or deities was seen as a contagion that might provoke divine wrath. Thus, criminals became offerings meant to restore divine favour to the city. The blazing pyre symbolised an effort to cleanse the wrongdoer spiritually. Romans believed these fiery deaths mitigated potential divine retribution, halting the spread of wickedness and mollifying the gods. By allowing fire to consume the guilty, they imagined sins burned away, purifying the individual in death and protecting the community by proxy. On execution day, the condemned were paraded to the site, a grim procession underlining their powerlessness against Roman authority. Bound and surrounded by jeers, each step signalled impending doom. This humiliation was as much a part of the punishment as the flames awaited them. Crowds from all strata of society gathered along the path. They witnessed firsthand the swift hand of Roman justice, the law's omnipresence made flesh. The parade was deliberately drawn out, crafting a narrative of moral peril that captivated and appalled the onlookers. Empathy, revulsion, excitement and fear mingled in the hearts of those gathered, each emotion rendered raw by the spectacle. Upon reaching the pyre, the condemned were secured to a stake amidst flammable materials. The pyre, akin to a sacrificial altar, turned an execution into a public ritual of judgment. As the flames rose, their dual nature as both creator and destroyer was laid bare, consuming body and sins alike. The air thickened with smoke and heat, a heavy atmosphere of anticipation and dread. Any last words were often lost to the roaring fire and the crowd's murmurs, swallowed by the chaos that embodied Roman justice. To the assembled, this act offered more than a thrill. It was a powerful message of the boundaries within Roman life. Though brutal, these events reinforced societal norms, reminding onlookers of the privileges and responsibilities of their citizenship. The spectacle served both to caution against dissent and to reaffirm shared values, its violent nature tolerated as necessary for social harmony. Historical accounts from historians like Tacitus and Suetonius provide chilling windows into these practices. Their narratives paint a stark picture, bustling with tension, capturing the atmosphere around these executions and the profound impact on societal order. Burnings often marked the imperial response to perceived chaos, becoming a tool for emperors to exert control and curb disorder. Chronicles of Christian persecutions reveal how deeply entwined execution and spectacle were in maintaining civic peace. Such events were not merely punitive, but deeply rooted in cultural and religious traditions, reflecting broader dynamics in Roman society. Central to the punishment was the myth of purification, the belief that fire cleansed the soul while destroying the body. Romans saw fire as a sacred purifier, offering redemption even in death. This notion aligned with religious practices, where sacrifices were burned to communicate with deities, and reinforced a moral dichotomy where punishment promised spiritual recompense. Here lay a narrative offering hope through pain, suggesting ultimate suffering could lead to peace. Fire held psychological power over the Roman populace, a reminder of the fine line between order and chaos. It symbolized state authority, imposingly branded onto flesh. Fire was essential to Roman life, from its domestic hearths to religious rites, bridging the tangible and the divine. It stood as a beacon of morality, its flames spelling out consequences for transgressions. The cultural echoes of these fiery rites are present in Roman architecture, proverbs and myths, threads interlaced with empire's narrative tapestry. Above all, burning alive as punishment highlighted Rome's grip on power, a vivid demonstration of the state's control over life and spirit. Each execution pronounced not only a crime's penalty, but the empire's omnipresent authority. This control was pivotal in tying Rome's complex society together under a single narrative, a justice code as fearsome as it was effective. Despite the centuries since the last execution fires extinguished, their legacy persists. These decisions reveal Rome's intricate tapestry, woven from tradition, religion, and legalism. Understanding this history provides insight into Rome's psychocultural matrix, a civilization that, amidst grandeur, sought moral order through stern punishment. Even now, the lingering impression of fire as a purifying force challenges us to confront broader questions of justice, power, and the human condition in our time, reminding us of a past where deterrence met divinity in fire's embrace. In the shadowy recesses of Roman military history lies the haunting practice known as fustuarium, a chilling testament to the ironclad discipline demanded by the ancient world's most formidable army. Originating in the early Roman Republic, fustuarium was more than mere punishment. It was a ritual steeped in the values of loyalty and obedience, core tenets that held Rome's armies together as they expanded the edges of civilization. In a time where order was paramount, insubordination wasn't just frowned upon, it was a cancer that could unravel the very fabric of the legions. Thus, fustuarium served as both a deterrent and a grim ritual to cement the notion of unity over individuality. When a soldier was accused of desertion or disobedience, a hush of grim understanding fell over the ranks. A military tribunal, hard and unsparing as the Roman sun, would adjudicate the matter. In this precarious setting, the accused faced higher-ranked officers, learned not just in the art of war, but in the maintenance of an unwavering martial code. While the broader Roman judicial system allowed for fairness and evidence, the military's need for uncompromising discipline often saw justice delivered with harsher overtones. Desertion or defiance wasn't mere malfeasance, but a potential fracture in the fortress of the Roman military, an institution upon which empires were built and sustained. Once guilt was hammered out by the tribunal's judgment, the proceedings shifted from courtroom drama to public spectacle, with ritualistic undertones designed to unnerve even the most battle-hardened. The condemned was led into an open space, surrounded by comrades, the very men alongside whom he had trained and fought. These same comrades, equipped with solid wooden clubs, bore the solemn responsibility of executing the sentence. This grim choreography, a collaborative act of discipline by the unit, served not just as punishment, but as a stark lesson in loyalty and the harsh realities of Roman military life. The act of fustuarium was more than a manifestation of justice. It was a visceral narrative played out under the vast, merciless sky, a testament to what betrayal and disunity could invoke. It was darkly symbolic, mingling the horror of violence with the necessity of cohesion, a scene that seared itself into the muscles and minds of those who swung the clubs, as well as those who stood witness to the chilling meeting of justice. The collective act of punishment struck deep into the psyche of the soldiers, reinforcing bonds through shared experience, albeit one soaked in dread and fear. The ritual of fustuarium etched its mark on the fabric of Roman soldiers' consciousness. Partaking in such brutal acts fostered an overarching atmosphere of fear and suspicion, where soldiers became acutely aware of the dire repercussions that shadowed disobedience. Yet, amid the dread, there was a forging of ties and strength, as the spectre of mutual accountability demanded the utmost camaraderie and cooperation. By compelling soldiers to participate directly in the enforcement of military law, the Roman command enshrined a stark unity bound by loyalty and survival instincts. Historical accounts, recorded by ancient chroniclers like Livy and Suetonius, offer stark insights into the nature and application of fustuarium. These narratives aren't mere dusty records, but vivid portrayals of the practice's brutality and its effect on the fabric of Roman military life. Take, for example, the case documented by Livy during the Second Punic War. A soldier, his heart tugged away from duty, slipped from the camp. His desertion threatened the integrity of his entire unit, illustrating the lethal seriousness attached to military fidelity in wartime. Culturally, fustuarium personified the ancient Roman ethos, where strength and discipline not only guarded the empire's borders, but also its social cohesion. The approach within the legions echoed the broader Roman worldview, where the state took precedence over the individual. The practice of fustuarium, though harsh, illuminated a culture where military and societal endurance fed into an empire's survival strategy. In juxtaposition, fustuarium's stark communal element marks it distinct from other ancient military punishments. The concurrent experience of justice not as an external decree but an internally enforced doctrine amplified its psychological grip on the legionaries. Yet across history, the Roman focus on collective discipline and strict adherence to enacted codes resonates within the broader spectrum of military justice right up to the modern era. Even today, fustuarium compels us to reflect on broader themes of authority, obedience, and human nature. The unsettling communal participation in such acts underscores timeless questions about loyalty and complicity, challenging our understanding of justice and the social order within militarized frameworks. Fustuarium's legacy endures as a dramatic illustration of the lengths to which humanity has gone to preserve hierarchy and order, reminding us of the complex dance between might, law, and morality through the vast river of human history. Decimation was a punishment feared by even the most hardened among Rome's legionaries, rooted in the Latin word decimatio. This severe penalty reflected not only the Romans' flair for harsh justice, but their commitment to absolute discipline. In a legion that stumbled into cowardice or rebellion, the errant soldiers faced a grim selection process, every 10th man condemned to death chosen by lot. It wasn't just about punishment, it was about enforcing a lesson in the most visceral way possible, ensuring that every soldier understood the lethal weight of collective failure. First formalised during the challenging days of the late Roman Republic, decimation was a disciplinary tool, aimed at fortifying the backbone of Roman military resilience. In its earlier mentions, as during the campaigns against the Latin League in 471 BCE under Appius Claudius Sabinus, decimation appeared as a desperate, albeit calculated response to military insubordination. Throughout the years under leaders like Crassus and Augustus, decimation evolved but never lost its brutal heart. The legion's cohesion was seen as sacred, and any faltering prompted draconian responses to preserve Rome's dominance. The process itself was chillingly meticulous. An entire cohort could be assembled, their anxious breaths mingling with the tense silence, a silence pierced only by the shuffle of lots. No man was safe. The draw was capricious. It was a paradox, an exercise in democracy to reinforce autocracy. Once designated, the chosen faced execution not from strangers but by the hands of their fellow soldiers, often through clubbing or stoning. This method ensured that the horror enveloped the entire unit, an audible crack of stone against bone, marking a brutal reminder of the costs of failure, embedding fear and obedience deep within the legion's psyche. The psychological torment of decimation extended far beyond the immediate threat of death. It bred a paranoia laced with dread, knowing one's life hung by the slender thread of communal fortune and failure. The constant spectre of an arbitrary end ensured that Roman soldiers adhered to discipline not out of camaraderie, but fear. Even as they fought shoulder to shoulder, unease simmered beneath, distrust woven through the ranks, companions bound to one another, yet haunted by the shadow of betrayal, wrought by obligation to execute a comrade. Historical accounts echo with decimation's resonating dread. During the Third Servile War, Crassus enforced this grim tactic to reinstate order amidst chaos, after his forces suffered humiliation at Spartacus's hands. Observers would later recall the ruthless display, the cold arithmetic of discipline that ultimately lent Crassus the brutal edge needed to quell rebellion. Another grim notation appears under Emperor Augustus, where decimation followed a Germanic campaign's catastrophic end, a testament to its role as both punishment and a tool of reasserting imperial control. Rome revered its martial prowess, crafting a system of rewards and punishments whereby decimation, as extreme as it was, served a pivotal role. It epitomised the harshness deemed necessary to ensure military victory, a bedrock of fear masked by the glory and duty of Roman arms. Stoic philosophy, internalised by Rome's leaders, underpinned this view. Figures like Seneca echoed the sentiment that personal sacrifice underscored greater achievement. As Romans saw it, enduring these draconian measures was a bitter pill swallowed for the empire's grandeur. Despite its perceived efficacy, decimation was not without flaws. While it secured obedience, it risked undermining unit cohesion, forcing soldiers into the traumatic roles of both executioner and survivor, eroded the essential trust woven between comrades. Resentment often simmered, survivors branded as both betrayers and betrayed, burdened with deep-seated grievances that could fester into future discord. Astute commanders balanced this razor's edge carefully, lest decimation's legacy twist from deterrent to detonator of further unrest. In contrast to the individual-focused punishments like flogging or demotion, decimation stood apart as a stark reminder of the stringent repercussions for collective actions. Other penalties sought correction, a more forgiving but firm hand in maintaining morale and order. Decimation, inherently devoid of personal accountability, traded understanding for sheer intimidation, a trade-off that reflected the brutal pragmatism of Roman military governance. While its direct practice faded with the empire's decline, the looming presence of decimation remained a haunting cautionary reference point in military history. It underscored an unwavering demand for loyalty through fear, a tactic that, while archaic, still sparks discussions on discipline's fine line. Although modern doctrines pivot more towards enhancing morale rather than inciting terror, the lessons from decimation's grim impact linger, reminding leaders of the precarious balance between discipline, authority, and humanity. Yet as we reflect on the chilling cadence of lots drawn in Roman tents, the past cautions on the weight of authority wielded without mercy, a history echoing down to the present, marked by human duty and the shadows of power. In the heart of ancient Rome, amid its grandeur and splendour, there lay a cold, unassuming structure, known to few as the Tullianum. Today one might speak of the Mamertine prison, but to the Romans it was an echo of fear and the epicentre of shadowed justice. Down here in these damp, sombre chambers, traitors and foes of the state came to meet their end, far removed from the Colosseum's clamour or the forum's chatter. The Tullianum was not built for public spectacle. It existed to serve the grim, silent efficiency of state power, embodying a place where time seemed to halt, shrouded in anguished whispers of the forgotten. The Tullianum was more than just a prison cell. It was a vault of despair. Enveloped in perpetual darkness, prisoners found themselves cloaked in an aura of isolation, with no hint of daylight to lend even the slightest comfort. These walls absorbed their sobs and agony, leaving no voice but echoes. There lay the stench of decay and damp, time-worn stones that reverberated with a terrible aloneness. Here, state punishment was not about grand declarations, but about quiet erasure. Those who vanished into its depths were removed entirely from the public eye, their deaths a secret shared only with shadows. Those confined within were stripped of identity and voice, reduced to nothing by the hush imposed by Rome's austere command. To arrive at the Tullianum signalled that one had committed perhaps the gravest offence of all, treason. In the vast cog of Rome's empire, few acts were considered as despicable as turning against the state. Traitors, seditious individuals, and rebels against Rome's order, whether distinguished leaders or everyday conspirators, found a path leading inevitably here. Treason was an adaptable charge, fitting as snugly as the magistrates desired among those ensnared by ambition or discontent. To be condemned was to be delivered to oblivion, a ruthless finality in a city that rarely forgave. Death by strangulation in the Tullianum was a departure marked by silence and eerie solitude. The state's executioners, or carcer sergeants, undertook their grim task with stark professionalism. Bound and weary from captivity, the condemned were ushered toward a silent end. There were no grand arenas or baying crowds, just an embrace of suffocating air, sometimes aided by a loop of rope. This act of erasure spoke volumes of power, an empire zealously scrubbing dissent from its ledgers. Bereft of the pageantry exhibited in open executions, it was an exercise in obliteration without applause, a testament to the chilling authority Rome exercised over both life and death. Every corner of the Tullianum resonated with stories swallowed by darkness. Jugurtha, Numidia's noble king who defied Rome, found his end here, a forgotten detail in the long list of conquests. Vercingetorix, the defiant Gallic chief who once stood against Caesar, was likewise extinguished in this noiseless void. Yet it wasn't only heroes of old who faded within these stones. There were uncelebrated lives that crossed the Empire's path, mistaken souls caught in political riptides. For each narrative terminated in silence, the Tullianum represented an ultimate convergence of defiance and Rome's unyielding grasp. Still, their fragmented stories lingered, a testament to aspirations and the crushing inevitability of a power absolute. The presence of the Tullianum extended beyond walls, seeping into Rome's psyche as a tool of fear. Here lay the essence of psychological warfare, where deterrence did not shout but murmured, leaving citizens in awe of an omnipotent state. Rome's rulers preferred their assertions to resonate spectrally, a quiet promise of doom for nonconformists. Unlike the raucous public punishments designed to instill immediate terror, the Tullianum whispered of realities best left unchallenged, preserving order through ambiguity and whispered threats. The Tullianum's architecture stood in consuming opposition to life beyond its crumbling facade. Below the city's splendour, prisoners descended through a grim, narrow aperture into corridors of stone and moisture. This simple design belied a profound technique in inducing despair. Beyond physical restraint, the oppressive air induced psychological unravelling, a place where death became a succouring escape from all pervasive dread. Over centuries, the Tullianum shed its grim cloak for a role of profound reverence. As Rome embraced Christianity, this former bastion of despair was recast anew and enshrined as the fabled prison of saints, a relic entwined with stories of apostolic struggle and divine redemption. Its evolution into a place of pilgrimage converted its stone walls into symbols of martyrdom, a reminder that sacred transformations often rise from least sacred instants. The legacy of the Tullianum traverses forgotten history, illustrating how civilizations wield power amid shadow. Even today, its concept discusses authority untethered or challenged. The Tullianum's not an empty ruin, but a lasting commentary on humanity's preoccupation with power and the suppression of dissent. Through its haunted silence, it reminds us of lives swept into historical recesses, echoing as part of Rome's vast, unyielding tapestry, a testament to the voices silenced, yet paradoxically never forgotten. In the shadowed corners of ancient Rome, where the air hung heavy with the scent of sweat and fear, the chilling practice of scourging took root. This ritual of pain was far more than a mere punishment. It was a methodical dance of terror and authority. The Romans, with their cold, calculating pragmatism, saw scourging as a necessary evil, one that cleansed the sinner's soul through suffering. A scourge, or flagrum, was crafted not just to strike but to tear, its leather thongs often studded with bone or metal fragments. Its real power lay in the way it laid bare the flesh, bearing raw red stripes that mirrored a new form of societal judgment and control. Victims bound to posts would contort in anguish, their cries piercing the din of everyday life, reminding everyone of the state's unforgiving wrath. This ritual was a performance of power and domination, a tableau vivant demonstrating the omnipresence of Roman law. Witnessing the flesh being split open under the lash was a stark lesson to all who dared tilt their heads in defiance. And so the spectacle went on, a grim dance between justice and cruelty. The searing pain was matched by an equally fierce psychological toll, leaving scars deeper than mere skin, marking souls and futures. For those condemned, the anticipation of the scourging brought a shadow of dread that loomed far larger than the event itself. News of the sentence spread quickly, a cruel reminder of personal failings publicly aired. This exposure dehumanized the individual, transforming the condemned into little more than a macabre, entertainment for the gathered throng. Society's label of disgraceful was a heavy mantle to bear, reducing all hope of redemption to a fleeting whisper, lost among the jeers and gasps of the onlookers. The stigma that lingered long after the body healed was a testament to the psychological devastation wrought by the whip. Communities, tightly knit and keenly aware of reputation, could be as damning as the whip itself, leaving those branded by it to grapple with their identity and place. Amidst the blood and cries, the artful choreography of the executioners emerged, each whip crack a carefully measured stroke, designed to maximise pain without cutting short the drama before the final act. These enforcers of justice were connoisseurs of suffering, each lash a deliberate echo of Roman order, stripping away dignity and leaving only submission. Scourging was even an opening act in the theatre of execution, a prelude to death that painted suffering as a path to a cleaner, albeit gruesome, purification. This purification wasn't just physical, but spiritual, a perverse prelude to redemption before the inevitable end. In a public execution or punishment, the boundaries of horror and spectacle often blurred, leaving room for both gasps of horror and the unnerving thrill of entertainment. Romans crowded to these displays, craving the rush of adrenaline that only such vivid scenes could provide. For spectators, it was a visceral kind of bonding, a shared experience in the face of barbaric justice. But amidst this dance of power, stories of resilience flickered against the brutal backdrop. Some victims, scarred yet unbroken, navigated the ruins of their social standing, their spirit's endurance celebrated in hushed tales shared across time. Yet even within this grim tapestry, the tales of those who prevailed against all odds became legends, the stuff of whispered wonderment in the dark corners of the Roman Empire. These were stories not just of survival, but of reclaiming identity, despite the marred flesh and shredded dignity. A paradoxical medal of tenacity etched into their being. For slaves and lower-class citizens, such resilience often won an undercurrent of respect, subtle nods to the spirit that defied even the sharpest blade of injustice. In a society obsessed with hierarchies, surviving the scourge could catapult an individual into near-mythical status, challenging societal norms and expectations. The practice also served as a mirror to the era's policies, reflecting the uneasy tension between brutal enforcement and the civic responsibility of governance. As Rome's vast empire absorbed myriad cultures, its punishments became a point of contention. Those advocating for reform wondered whether pure brutality was truly an effective deterrent. Although scourging predominantly targeted the powerless, slaves, prisoners, and the lowly, it sent a clear message across all social tiers. Here lay the even hand of Roman justice. The unintended legacy, a blueprint passed down through ages, continued to shape discourses around punishment's role in moral order. In this, the legacy of scourging looms large, a stark reminder of humanity's fascination with suffering. Even today, its echoes resound in the darker corners of our minds, raising questions about the humanity and ethics of past practices. The lash of the scourge, though silent, still whispers to us, teasing out reflections of retribution, justice, and the nuanced dance between power and human spirit. As the pages of history continue to turn, the memory of the whip serves as a haunting reminder of where we've been, and perhaps a cautionary tale of where we might yet head. In the vast tapestry of Roman society, one thread weaves a particularly haunting tale: the practice of exposure. In a world often governed by harsh realities, the abandonment of infants, particularly those deemed unwanted or unnecessary, was both a societal decision and a survival tactic. Families faced with economic strains sometimes saw no alternative but to leave their newborns on secluded hillsides and desolate crossroads. The cries of these forsaken infants, however, seldom reached the ears of those with means to intervene, becoming a sombre reminder of the harsh expectations placed upon Roman citizens. Conceived out of necessity, this practice was embroiled in the economics and traditions that defined Roman life. In homes where every additional mouth meant potential ruin, parents wrestled with heart-wrenching decisions. Labourers and farmers, living on the cusp of poverty, found themselves turning to exposure when the fragility of their financial survival was at stake. This harsh arithmetic reflected a mindset where familial honour and societal structure took precedence over sentimental ties, pushing parents to prefer the spectre of abandonment over the certainty of starvation. Yet amid this brutality lay a paradox of survival. Exposure wasn't an irrevocable death sentence. Unexpected tales emerged in which infants left to fate were snatched from the jaws of death by mysterious benefactors or kindly strangers. The city that birthed Romulus and Remus perpetuated the belief in such improbable rescues, spinning narratives where the gods' tangled whims offered salvation amidst despair. These dualities of abandonment and rescue epitomised the age-old dance between fate and free will, leaving a complex mosaic of hope and hopelessness painted across Roman life. The societal colours of Rome were saturated with a discernible gender bias, often dictating that daughters bore the brunt of exposure's grim reality. Sons were coveted for their future contributions to labour and legacy, while daughters, viewed as liabilities due to their dowries, frequently faced abandonment. The survival of exposed girls when it occurred often meant immersion into servitude or future marriages that spoke more to their value as commodities than as cherished family members. Despite such adversity, women who survived exposure became living contradictions, embodying both the vulnerabilities and the inherent strength foisted upon their gender by societal structures. While the Romans largely accepted exposure as a grim necessity, debates on its morality occasionally simmered in the philosophical circles of the time. Thinkers like Seneca poked at the ethical hornet's nest, questioning whether the customary pragmatism could justify such cruelty. Despite these discussions rarely altering societal behaviour, they spotlighted the tensions between traditional norms and emergent ethical introspection. The ethical debates surrounding exposure were whispers within Roman society, hinting at a burgeoning consciousness amidst the unyielding march of ancient customs. The Roman legal system painted exposure in a legalistic shade of grey, a reflection of societal norms codified in civics rather than explicitly outlawed. By omitting a firm stance, Roman law tacitly affirmed parents' autonomy in deciding an infant's fate, threading a line between state regulation and personal discretion. Yet, infanticide fell under the realm of punishment, offering a thin veneer of moral guidance within the private sphere. The nuanced dance of law and custom served to uphold social order, subtly reinforcing hierarchies and maintaining the precarious balance of power and fear. Remarkably, the act of exposure sometimes birthed stories of rescue and redemption, tales where infant cries were unexpectedly answered by strangers moved by compassion or circumstance. These narratives, whether threaded through historical texts or legend, invigorated the cultural mythology of Rome with tales of divine intervention and miraculous ascent. Figures like Romulus and Remus echoed through history, their stories entwined with the cultural psyche as potent symbols of destiny's unpredictable hand. By examining the practice of exposure alongside other ancient civilizations, we glimpse both parallels and divergences in how societies reconcile necessity with moral imperatives. Economic constraints were a common thread across cultures, yet divergent perspectives on exposure reveal a tapestry of global human inclinations. The Romans, with their staunch traditionalism, painted one portrait of human struggle. Alternative customs showcased varying degrees of acceptance or condemnation, enriching our grasp of history's complex moral kaleidoscope. Amid the tales of exposed infants are the unheard echoes of mothers and families, their narratives often lost to time. For many women, the act of abandoning a child bore unimaginable grief, an act driven not by choice, but by survival's cold inevitability. Such emotional depth unveils the personal toll of what history may otherwise reduce to mere statistics. Family dynamics further added layers to this grim practice, where social standing and legacy intertwined with individual fates, binding personal narratives tightly with societal norms. The legacy of exposure resonated throughout Roman society, influencing literature and myth with powerful imagery of abandoned infants who rose against the odds. These romanticized accounts underscored the cultural obsession with themes of fortune and destiny, while subtly critiquing the society that allowed such brutality to endure. Today, as we unravel these narratives, we confront not just the ancient past, but the perennial questions of survival, morality, and the capacity for both cruelty and compassion. These tales beckon us to consider our own societal norms, bridging the chasm between ancient practices and contemporary reflections on human ethics and resilience. In the heart of ancient Rome, punishment was an art, crafted with precision not just for retribution, but as an emblem of the state's omnipotent reach. Each execution was a carefully curated spectacle, designed to remind every citizen that the cost of defiance was not a mere whim of authority, but a calculated tool of control. It was less about the act itself and more about imprinting an indelible lesson on the public mind. Defying Rome was akin to flirting with death. This architectural spectacle was embedded in the collective consciousness and became integral to the social order, ensuring fear of authority lived in every Roman's bones. The spectacle of punishment in Rome served as both an ending and a new beginning, a conclusion for the condemned and a glaring, gruesome reminder to the witnesses. These orchestrated acts of terror were not only meant to break the body, but to etch a long-lasting psychological scar, maintaining a culture of submission long after the cries of the punished had faded. Roman executions steeped in ritual were layered with societal cues. The condemned were often paraded through public streets before their demise, a cruel parade embodying the power the state held, and a chance for the convicted to evoke sympathy, a chance seldom realised. Each step toward execution was a journey laden with reminders of Rome's unchallenged authority, manifest in statues of gods and the ever-watchful gaze of Roman officials. Yet this was more than about draining life. It was about draining identity. The rituals stripped the condemned of humanity, transforming them into emblems of wrongdoing under the guise of state-sanctioned justice. This dehumanization was purposefully wrapped in false piety, presenting the act not just as execution, but a cleansing ritual for society's soul. Each execution was a script in a deeper narrative about societal unity, drawing lines in the sand aligning with imperial and moral expectations. In tracing punishments through Roman society, we see a reflection of entrenched social hierarchies. It wasn't just about the wrongdoing, but who had done it. Social status determined whether you met the cross or were exiled with relative dignity. This disparity communicated messages of worth and contribution, or the lack thereof. Power dynamics played out visibly, highlighting privilege where a noble may escape with far less severe retribution, while ordinary citizens face the savagery of harsher penalties, embedding a grim reminder of societal division. These punitive measures mirrored the broader Rome, where laws were as flexible as they were unforgiving. There was a stark paradox between Rome's celebrated intellectual achievements and its visceral brutality. Roman justice, with its cruel spectacles, raises the question: how could such cultivated aesthetics coexist with such raw ferocity? This dual nature was pivotal, for the Romans recognized that fear was more reliable than affection in governance. The rigid codification of laws concealed an elastic application, manipulated to preserve order and reinforce class privilege. Public executions were chess moves in the political arena, not just spectacles of justice, but acts of statecraft. Leaders used these events to assert dominance, silence opposition, and deter rebellion. The haunting vision of Spartacus's crucified followers is a testament to how execution was wielded as a tool for reinforcing the futility of rebellion. These political maneuvers came with risks, for miscalculation incited discontent. Fear was woven into the fabric of Roman society, not merely an emotion, but a critical mechanism of statecraft. The Romans thrived on its use, using public executions to amplify it, ensuring even those with spotless records felt the empire's grasp keenly. This constant shadow of fear functioned as a societal adhesive, binding people to the empire and its hierarchy. The psychological impact of public executions was profound. They were a chilling education in conformity. Citizens, bearing witness to the horrors of defiance, learned the price of rebellion firsthand. This fear crept into every corner of Roman life, guiding actions and shaping values. Individuals internalized this dread, holding it close as they navigated the labyrinthine expectations of Roman society. Public spaces were forever altered by the reverberations of terror. The grandeur of places like the Colosseum masked their true role as vessels of imperial power. These sprawling venues were arenas of psychological warfare where shared memory and collective reverence intertwined. Execution sites became hallowed grounds in a twisted sanctity, etching stories of dominance and submission into the very landscape. The legacy of Roman punishment stretches far beyond its time, influencing subsequent societies either through emulation or reflection. The chilling allure of Roman punishment continues to echo through literature and art, influencing modern perceptions of justice. The intertwining of deterrence with spectacle laid foundational stones for understanding law's dual nature. Ironically, Roman justice, both feared and admired, offers a lesson for the ages. It shows how deeply rooted our respect for authority and obedience can become in the shadow of harsh measures. Rome's system challenges modern sensibilities, but its story, rich with contradictions, compels us to reflect on the thin veil separating order from oppression. As we ponder these tales from history, consider the enduring interplay of power and fear. Thank you for watching, and if you found this journey through history engaging, subscribe and explore more with us.